Okay, welcome. Thank you for joining us today for our nonprofit panel with Impact 100. This is actually one of my favorite events of the year because we get to connect with our past applicants and recipients and hear all about the down and dirty process of applying for and receiving grants from Impact 100. I'm Sarah Grace Mohr, our president this year, and with me from Impact 100 is Kathy Thornton, our grants review cluster chair. She helps make sure that this is all running as smoothly as possible, and she had a very large job this year. Kathy, would you like to say any welcomes before we get started?
Sure. I'm just really grateful for our panelists who are here with us and sharing their time and expertise. And so thank you very much for being here. And also to all the participants, this is the fourth session that we have had in our getting ready to think about applying for an Impact 100 grant. We started back in October with a partnership with Grants Plus that did gave folks some ideas about thinking about applying for grants during a pandemic or during a crisis. And then we had our full letter of intent training. And then last week we tried something new and just had sort of a question and answer session. And so we had great participation. So we're looking forward to this event as well. And again, thanks to everybody for being here. We will set it up so that we have some set questions that we will direct to each of our panelists. If you have questions, if you're a participant, feel free to put them in the chat at any time, but we will actually open things up for just ongoing questions at the end of our set questions. So thanks again for being here.
Great. So we're going to get it started with our wonderful panelists and let them tell you a little bit about themselves. So panelists, I'm going to ask you who you are and what your organization does. And since we're on Zoom, I'm going to call on you because everybody's orders crazy and different. So Adrijana, I'm going to let you take it away, please.
Unmute first. Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Adrijana Kowatsch. I am the Executive Director of Gateway Community and Technical Foundation, College Foundation. We are essentially a fundraising arm for the college. So our purpose is to raise private dollars for support of the college's scholarships and initiatives. And if you don't know, Gateway Community and Technical College is really the only on Northern Kentucky side, but one of two in the region in terms of two-year colleges. We offer about 170 or so tracks, diplomas, degrees, and certificates. We serve about 4,500 or so students each semester. And again, we have a nice mix of both traditional students, folks you would think about going to school, except when they come to us for the first 2 years, they pay significantly less and they can transfer all of their credits to a 4-year school. Importantly, we also serve students who are more non-traditional, which means that they are a bit older. They often have family that they're raising and often balance a job in addition to taking classes. So those students in particular need a lot of wraparound support. And so a lot of our initiatives have to do with, one, engaging the students to come to us, but then secondly, to make sure that they successfully get their degree. And that takes a lot of support. So I'll stop right there, and then I'm happy to answer any questions further. And always feel free to check us out on the web.
Thank you, Adrijana. Pat, I'd love for you to share a little bit about you and your organization.
Okay, fine, thank you. My name is Pat Leigh, and I'm the president of the Althea Augustine Technology Learning Center, referred to as either AATLC or just simply the Althea Center. We were established to create and maintain a fully functional 21st century technology and learning center in the community of Lincoln Heights, Ohio, which is predominantly and historically African-American or Black, and has a high rate of poverty. We were established to provide educational personnel and services and equipment to children, adults, and seniors, after-school programming, multimedia project development, ultimately GED help, many services. we are to attempt to close the gaping gap in digital equity. So that is what we're all about.
Lovely. Thank you, Pat. And Joel, you are up next, sir. Take it away.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm Joel Bokelman. My wife, Marnie, and I started 8 years. I currently serve as the executive director. Our mission is to remove transportation barriers for people who are working their way out of poverty. And we currently have 4 different programs for how we do that. And then we are one of the collaborative partner organizations located at CityLink Center.
Fantastic. Thanks, Joel. And Claire, last but not least, please tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization.
Sure. My name is Claire Luby Colton. I work at St. Vincent de Paul here in Cincinnati. St. Vincent de Paul has been around since 1869 in Cincinnati, although a lot of folks may just know one small piece of St. Vincent de Paul, maybe just our thrift stores, or maybe just you may know us at the parish level. But overall, what we are here to do in Cincinnati is to ensure our neighbors can access the basic necessities they need. And in doing that, we are committed to also providing our neighbors with the dignity that comes with having those essentials. St. Vincent de Paul is traditionally a Catholic organization, but we serve neighbors of all denominations. And it's not a requirement to be Catholic to work or serve through St. Vincent de Paul. So we are just there to serve. Our services range from our charitable pharmacy, which we'll talk more about because that's the initiative that was funded through our grant, to our choice food pantry, to our homelessness prevention program, which is rent utility assistance primarily, to our clothing vouchers, clothing furniture vouchers that folks can redeem at our thrift stores. So really a wide range of just the basic necessities. Our primary headquarters are in the West End at our Nair Outreach Center. But we do partner with about 53 of the churches around Cincinnati where we host volunteer groups as well. And those volunteers are serving neighbors within their little community.
Okay, thanks very much for sort of setting the stage for who you are and what it is you do. So the next question is really about what you did when you applied for Impact 100, and there are several parts to this question. You can take them in whatever order makes sense for you. So we're going to ask you to please describe the funding request that you made to Impact 100 and the focus area under which you applied, and then give sort of some sense of how you conveyed your funding request through the letter of intent in sort of a clear but concise way. And did you feel like your application had more breadth, depth, or perhaps both? So an overview of your whole sense about your funding request from Impact 100. So why don't we start with Joel?
Great, I just saw a question pop up on the chat. I'm with Changing Gears, so I'll just answer that here. Yeah, so we applied to support what's called our Bridge program. And the Bridge program solves this chicken and egg dilemma that exists with jobs and cars. And it is, how do you get a job without a car? And how do you get a car without a job, especially in a city like Cincinnati? And so we focused our request on supporting that Bridge program. We applied under the family focus area. And I would say our LOI and our application had more depth because it was, I feel like, pretty laser focused on our Bridge program. You know, there's other programs, other things that Changing Gears does, but I felt like we were very focused on, this is what we're going to do with this money. We are going to buy 20 cars, and it's going to help expand our Bridge program so that we can help more clients as soon as they're ready to get a job, that they have the car to get there.
Thank you, Joel. Pat, would you like to go next, please? You have to unmute, Pat.
Okay, I said I was going to remember that. Okay. I applied under the education focus area, and the center is to provide access to the community to technologies during public hours, but I applied for the programming. And so I applied for funding for the Digital Equity and Technology Infusion overarching initiative. And so it includes several programs specific to content areas and various age groups. It's multifaceted in that it aims to enhance the learning of various advanced technologies. So we have digital equity and technology infusion in literacy, STEM, and health, which means fitness and movement. And they're designed for school-age children. But we also have digital equity and technology infusion for seniors and adults. And so the funds requested would simply be used exclusively to purchase technologies needed to implement and support those programs. So I would say the application was very focused and therefore more in-depth than breadth.
Claire, would you go next, please?
Sure. I've worked at St. Vincent de Paul in a fundraising capacity for 6 years now. And for 6 years, I'd say, well, I guess since we were funded about a year ago now, for 5 years, I should say, we were considering Impact 100. And we kept always thinking about, are we at the right point? Do we have the right project? And finally, I guess it was 2018, we said we have the right project. And I think it proved to be correct. So our project was to support the expansion of our charitable pharmacy. And this was in conjunction with a larger campaign to build our new Nair Outreach Center. But specifically, we targeted one really specific piece of the expansion, the charitable pharmacy. And it was not just the bricks and mortar of the new charitable pharmacy, it was also the staffing that we would need to operate that charitable pharmacy, the new expanded charitable pharmacy. And so the project was really easy to understand, I think. We had very clearly defined outcomes for it. We had secured a lot of support for this initiative in other places first. And so we kind of had this stamp of approval from other donors as well as from other partners saying, this is something we want to be part of. And so we felt like we had a pretty strong case to go to Impact. And when we went to Impact, we really were at a point that, like, if we didn't get this Impact gift, we were like, what else are we going to do? So it was a really, I think, compelling request in that way too, that they were kind of one of our final supporters of this initiative. But it was very much, they were one piece of a larger initiative, which we were a little nervous about, frankly, going into in presenting our request, that it wasn't just Impact making this happen. It was, all these others who had supported us as well, but that did not affect our request. So I think I'll leave it at that for now. I think I answered the question.
And Claire, which focus area did you apply in?
Oh, I'm sorry, health and wellness.
Okay, thanks. And Adriana.
Yeah, I'll echo quickly what a few other fellow recipients had said, in the sense that ours was a more in-depth proposal and application. We asked Impact for support of the expansion of our food pantry. Prior to Impact support, we had very much a sort of a grassroots effort. I mentioned those non-traditional students. They would often disclose with their advisors that they were hungry, or that they had skipped a meal, or that they had not eaten as well as they would have liked to, or there was just juggling happening with sort of this basic need. And this, we had an employee who started this effort. Really, it was a labor of love. just started to kind of collect supplies and have these kind of emergency bags that we would offer to students as these things would come up. And so we grew into this, what I'd like to call it, it's like closet space that we fitted into a mini food pantry. It's just in one of our campuses. We have 3 locations. So the one I'm mentioning is in Covington, where we saw the highest need. We also have a location in Edgewood and one in Florence. And so on the foundation side, we were successful in having companies raise some dollars for us or have food drives and offer supplies, but we really didn't have the ability to expand the project to our other locations. So what would happen is that we would have this employee whose job this wasn't. So this was sort of, again, added to their responsibilities, and they self-volunteered for that. They would put supplies into back of their car and meet a student if they needed help at one of our other campuses. And so just really clunky, not very efficient. And we just thought about how many students we weren't able to help because they didn't even know that Sarah was willing to, pack up her car and meet them somewhere. So they just, they didn't even ask for support. And then the other thing that struck me is having gone to Master Provisions and Free Store Food Bank, where we would get some of our supplies, we only could get stuff that's shelf stable. And so, as that's fine. And if you're hungry, that's great. But it's not necessarily the most nutritionally dense stuff. And we would have people offer us eggs, or farmers would offer fresh produce, and we had nowhere to store it. So part of our request under health and wellness to Impact 100 was not only to expand to our other campuses, but to offer commercial refrigeration so that we can start to offer fresh food. I would say our biggest challenge, that's a pretty straightforward request, right? We have a food pantry, we want to expand it, we want to offer fresh food options. The biggest issue we had is to make sure that people kind of break their mental model of what a college is and who goes there, and the fact that this is a real issue on our college campus. So sort of educating the membership that this is real. It's a barrier to completion of their program. And if you support a student, you support their student, you support their family. We all sort of rise together. So for us, I think it was more challenging to make sure people understood the reality. And I think that's what our LOI focused, and certainly our proposal was really focused on making sure people understood the issue more so than kind of the nuts and bolts of what we would do with the money.
Great, thank you, Adriana. We actually have a follow-up question to this, which I want to get to. So all these proposals seem to be really specific in terms of the project narrative. How detailed did you go on your budget for the LOI versus the full application? And Pat, you are unmuted. I'm going to call on you first.
Well, there was an issue with mine, my proposal. So it's interesting that question came up. I failed to mention that when I introduced myself that we are a startup in the strictest sense of the word. So the Althea Center was incorporated in 2018 and was awarded 501c3 status just last year. So we had very low operating budget coming into it and virtually going through the whole process. So we were unusual in that we were not the impacts definition of a startup, because a startup generally has some history of seeking funding. So it was real challenge. The budget turned out to be a real challenge, which relates to the second and third question. Not enough detail was provided, and that was a problem for me. So that would be part of my recommendation also for people.
Great, Pat. Thank you for sharing. Joel, can you speak to your situation?
I would say give as much detail as you can, but keep it simple. So for ours, for example, we applied for purchasing and getting cars ready for our bridge program. So it broke down really simply where it cost us about $3,000 to buy a car, $1,000 in parts to fix it up, and $1,000 in labor. But it was clear and concise that for every $5,000 we could get a car into this program. So we didn't dive into what parts we're going to buy or how we're going to do the services and the labor, because we don't know that, but we do know from our history the averages are this. And so it was as much detail as we could provide, but it was, I mean, the budget, I was a little nervous. It looked a little too simple, but I think it was clear what we were going to do with the money.
Great. Thanks, Joel. Claire, would you like to speak about the charitable pharmacy?
Sure. In our LOI, we kept things pretty simple, and we just listed really two expenses. One was capital expenses associated with the construction of the new charitable pharmacy, and then the other expense, so it was nearly 50-50. The other expense was salary for a new part-time pharmacist. So that was in our LOI, was just that level of detail. In our full proposal, we got way more specific. And so we even got estimates from our contractors on, you know, how much is that countertop going to cost us, and, you know, as much detail as we possibly could. So big difference in the two. I'm actually, you know, I'm not sure what other organizations' experience is, but I do think the more detailed, the better. So I'm glad we somehow got through that first LOI stage, just with keeping it at that real high level. And then, of course, we were able to drill down with the full proposal. But I'd say if you have the full detail for the LOI stage, that's probably the best way to go about it.
Great.
Could I come back to that question too?
Absolutely.
Okay. I was talking about the problem with the operating budget, but as far as how I was bending the proposed funding from Impact, I supplied a great deal of detail because mine was all to be spent on technologies and equipment. So I had already determined the models and the price at an educational discount that I anticipated getting. So I included that detail in the LOI and also in the common grant. But after the site visit, I was asked to verify somehow those quotes. Okay. And so I had to go back and re-verify those.
Great. Thank you for the clarification, Pat. Appreciate it. And Adrijana, lastly, for you.
Yeah, super simple for us. I think it was 5 lines at the point of LOI. You know, I would just encourage you to think about what are your discrete categories, right? Like one of these things is not like the other. So if it's personnel, if it's equipment, if it's marketing or whatever, we had 5 lines at the point of LOI with our categories. And I felt like that was descriptive enough to at least give a flavor of the kinds of activities we would be engaging in as part of the grant if we were successful. At the point of the full proposal, you know, we went more in detail. So for us, that worked.
Great, thank you. And Kristen, your question on sustainability, I am going to hold until the end, just because I do think it's a pretty beefy question to ask. So we're going to move on to our scripted next question, which is, why do you think your organization was chosen to receive funding by Impact 100? Please give special consideration to how your requested program, project, capital investment, etc., challenged, expanded, or deepened your business as usual, in air quotes. And I'm going to start with Claire.
Okay, I think one really compelling piece of our request is that it was so relatable for everyone. I mean, so many of us rely on medications to maintain our lifestyles. And so this request for our charitable pharmacy was to ensure that neighbors in need could access medications just like, you know, all of us do. And so I think, and we also noticed how expensive medications can be. And so it was just, I think, relatable. I think people really understood the need for it. It wasn't hard to comprehend, like, you know, that why is this needed? It was just so clear. I think too, and we'll get more into this, but our presentation at the annual awards celebration included a neighbor served by our charitable pharmacy, and it was a woman, and she was in her 60s probably, and so I'd say even too, you know, a lot of the impact members could probably kind of see themselves in the woman that spoke on our behalf. Sandra just told a really great story that night about her personal life. And so I've even heard that from impact members since then over the last, you know, year. Man, I just keep thinking about Sandra and her story. So it really stuck with folks. So I think that's probably why we were selected. I think too, our request was just going back to the budget. Like, it was very clear how we would use these funds. And that I think impact members like that because, you know, this is their money. They want to know very specifically how the organization will be putting their money into play. Sarah, the second part of your question was about the impact on our organization. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
So, sorry, you're on mute.
Man, we're all getting it. To how your program, project, or investment challenged, expanded, or deepened your business as usual.
So our project that we presented to Impact was part of a larger initiative, but this was a really important part of a much larger initiative. And I think this gave us a lot of momentum when we needed it to finish our overall campaign for our new outreach center. Knowing that charitable pharmacy had the support it needed to come to fruition was a really big boost for us. I think it also, we generated a lot of new interest in the charitable pharmacy through this. And so that has continue to affect kind of our business model, and that we have new friends and supporters and people who are telling our story for us. So like I mentioned in the beginning, so many folks know about St. Vincent de Paul. They've heard something about St. Vincent de Paul. They serve people, they help out, but the charitable pharmacy is kind of like this hidden gem, and it's just as important for folks to know about it so they can support us, but also because so many of us are just really one step from needing the charitable pharmacy. And so I think we've seen that the need for our service, we've seen a ton of new patients, and a lot of it's been in conjunction with the pandemic, but you know, perhaps too, some of it's through Impact, and that people are just talking about us more. They know the charitable pharmacy exists now, and it's great because we actually now have the capacity to serve more folks because of the Impact grant. So that's I think hopefully I've answered your question there, Sarah.
Great, thank you, Claire. Absolutely. Adrijana, could you speak to this question, please?
Sure. Why do I think that we got selected? I'd like to think generally, I mean, you know, when you get to the finalist stage and you just see your competition, if you will, I mean, these are such worthy projects. I think that goes without saying that I think anything that nonprofits are doing is a worthy cause. So I'd like to think we got it for that reason, but also I do think that the pandemic has potentially influenced or heightened the need for folks to understand how critical some of these essential needs are for people's everyday. For us, you know, we have students who work, so half of our students, actually more than that, balance a job and go to school, and they were so affected by the furloughs that happened, you know, early in the spring. So again, that this was always an issue, but it just heightened that. And again, we were able to kind of shine a light to that. I think for us, it's not business as usual. And I mentioned that this was a transformative gift. And I think it's intended to be that way for a reason. There's a reason why Impact 100 doesn't give, a bunch of smaller grants. This is meant to be transformative. And so for us, it is. It's really important, I think, for us to be able to serve our students where they are and not just tell them, get in a car, which you may or may not have, drive down to yet another place to try to get the kind of support that you need, where we are aware of that need right off the bat. So we wanted to triage what we had to kind of in a crisis mode, and then connect students to resources that would help them on an ongoing basis. So for me, I think it's a worthy effort regardless of the situation, but certainly the pandemic did heighten the need for that.
Great, thank you. And then Pat, I would love for you to share your unique perspective for those on the call. Unfortunately, Pat and Althea Augustine did not receive a grant this year, but I would love to hear your thoughts on why and so.
Love to share them. This is my longest answer. So I want to share my thoughts on why I didn't get it, but also my thoughts on why I did get to be a finalist and the benefits. I believe I had a very strong application and had received unsolicited compliments from leadership throughout the process, but there was a significant weak spot in my application. I had no history of securing grants. In addition, the other, as been indicated by Adrijana, the other 7 finalists were very strong and competitive overall and had been in business for a while. But while I was one of the 8 finalists, I can speak to why I was chosen over maybe 92 other applicants that didn't get that far. I was told that the committee appreciated what my organization had to offer an entire African-American community that had been left behind long before the technology age, and how we were aiming to close this digital divide and this gaping gap in technology access and use. And so we were a far cry from business as usual. I also was told that the committee was impressed with my passion and commitment to this project of establishing and delivering this center. So if you are the one with the passion and commitment, do not delegate your involvement in this project to anyone else in your team. At this point, I want to emphasize the fact that although I did not receive the coveted Impact Award, my 2021 budget was funded as a result of being an Impact 100 finalist. So that's a story all in itself. Even though you have to be a finalist to get to the ultimate $100,000 grant, being a finalist has rewards when it ends there. As a finalist, key Impact 100 members became intimately familiar with your work, and in the end, 500 total members can potentially vote on you after viewing your final presentation. This exposure leads to those members coming forward with donations even though you didn't receive the coveted award, which happened to me. Other foundations have also contacted me about initiatives that will benefit my community or tips on applying for upcoming grants in their organization. In addition, companies offer a year of their services to all finalists. One that stands out for me is a company that I thought would not have anything to offer me, but I contacted them anyway. They decided to take a total different approach with me and offered a year of their online delivery system and will convert my face-to-face lessons to online lessons or courses. This is very important as I explore how to deliver these programs to children, adults, and seniors during this pandemic. So believe Impact 100 when they tell you that being a finalist is winning also, even if it ends there.
Wow, Pat, thank you so much. I think you maybe stole the show today with those words. Those are beautiful. And I want to just echo what you said at the very beginning of, if you have the passion, don't delegate it. I think that was that was maybe probably the most important feedback we've received so far. So maybe let's quote that. And Joel, you last but not least, take it away, please.
Great, make me follow Pat. Pat, thanks. Yeah, so let's see why. I think that the timing and the project were right, and Claire hit this before. Of knowing when the timing is right, and we actually applied in like 2013 as we were just getting started, and it was just sort of, I think we were attracted to $100,000, and we said, oh, let's throw an LOI in there, and we didn't even get past the LOI stage at that point. And so I'd seen other organizations that had gotten close but not over the finish line. Tool Bank was one of those, and I saw personally how much work it would take. And so to me, I kind of said, hey, until we're ready, we're not going to apply, because you'd see the emails come out every year, check out the LOI training and stuff. And so for us, it was, when the timing is right, we'll go for it. And the bridge program, as it came up, it said, this is right for us. It was concrete. It was something that the money could be used to purchase. And it just, everything felt right about it. So that's why I think why we had success was timing and the right program. This expanded our mission of removing transportation barriers for people who are working their way out of poverty, but it also challenged our existing programs, because the bridge, well, I'll say that our purchase program is where we're more like Habitat for Humanity, but for cars, where we restore donated cars, and then we fix those up and sell them to people as they're coming through our program. But we require that they already be working and they have money saved for a down payment and that initial payment. And so that creates the problem between jobs and cars, because we're saying you have to have a job before you get a car, even in our programs. And so our bridge program kind of challenges our business as usual. And so that's how it's able to expand our mission in that way. So I think that resonated as well.
Thanks, everybody. Most of you know, or I think probably know, that the Impact 100 grant process is a fairly comprehensive program that starts with the letter of intent, and then a certain percentage of those letter of intent applicants are invited to submit a full grant. And then following that particular review process, a certain number of applicants are invited to have a site visit. So the question I have for you all is about the site visit. And I'm going to start with Claire, because their site visit was pre-pandemic, which will make it different than Joel, Pat, and Adriana's site visit. So I'm going to start with Claire. So the question about the site visit is sort of give a sense of what the site visit was like for you. How were you contacted? Who participated? What kinds of questions did you get for that site visit? So your whole experience with the site visit. So Claire, take it away.
We were thrilled to be able to host an on-site site visit, because I think it was so easy to see the need in hosting people on site. So we prepared a lot for the site visit. And to go back to Pat's point about, if you have the passion, don't delegate. Well, I think it's too about recognizing who on your team has the most passion almost. We all feel, we're all excited about this project, but I didn't play a big role in the site visit. I played probably the smallest role in the site visit. And so we had worked with our team weeks in advance to put together kind of a plan for the site visit. So, and our folks who were involved in the site visit, our executive director, our charitable pharmacy director, our part-time pharmacist, who would have become a full-time pharmacist if we got funded, and a patient, the same patient who then spoke for us at the annual awards ceremony. And I think that was it. So we had a pretty, diverse team gather to be part of the site visit. And so it really, I'd say, spend the time preparing with your team. If you have a chance to include others' voices, I think site visit provides a great opportunity to do that, but it takes a lot of preparation and coordination. So we included a quick slideshow that spoke to kind of some of the nuts and bolts of our project. But then majority of the time was spent touring. And so we showed folks our current charitable pharmacy and how we were able to serve neighbors and the limitations we had in serving neighbors in our current space. And then we actually took folks to the new location, the soon to be new location of the charitable pharmacy, and showed folks, kind of encouraged them to put on their imagination and just imagine with us what this new space would look like. So we were there when it was just, concrete. There's still a ton of work to be done in the charitable pharmacy new location, but we were able to kind of take people into the construction site and dream with them. Let's think about what this is going to look like, how neighbors will be served differently than they were across the street in our old space. So that was great to be able to show folks kind of both like before and what could be with your support, including a patient served, I think, in the site visit that was huge too. People spoke highly of being able to actually hear from someone impacted by the program. And then certainly having our team express that passion was just, I think, a really nice, to be able to see it and feel it for impact members was really critical to our success too, I'd say. So most of the visit was really interactive. Very, very little bit of it was just kind of formal sit down presentation. Let's talk about the project. And then it was just come along with us and feel it, touch it, see it. So I love that we had the chance to host folks on site.
Thanks, Claire. And, the pandemic has, forced all of us to do things differently. And our site visits this year were certainly different in that sense. But Adrijana, can you share with us your experience?
Yeah, so it came about to us through a phone call from one of the members of the review committee for health and wellness. It was super exciting. What I would suggest is, in our case, we left the scheduling entirely to the group because it was my hope that we would get as many Impact 100 members to be able to attend. So again, we were as flexible as we could be. We just said, tell us when most of you can be there, because I wanted people to fall in love with us, and I wanted as many of them to be there as possible. So again, try to offer that flexibility. Sarah and Kathy, you might have a different perspective, but I'd say as an applicant a couple of times and the recipient twice, not in the same organization, I treated each of the steps of the process as its own thing. We had to give our best shot to the LOI. We had to give our best shot to the grant proposal. And when it came to the site visit, I was not going to count on the fact that everyone had read my proposal and thought those were just the greatest things ever. I mean, I assumed nobody knew anything. And I also assumed that didn't guarantee me the next step. So I really treated each of those steps as its own, this is where we are in a process and we are giving this our best shot. So yes, preparation is super important. The way we divvied up this one is we had program folks, a person who's really passionate about it and is kind of on the ground, could talk about the impact that she sees on the students. I was able to field all the financial questions. And then if there was references to a proposal, our grant writer was there as well. We wish we had people on campus because I do think just that immersion is really, really important. But we didn't. And therefore, I think that programmatic on the ground person was really able to answer questions. And then the thing that is always surprising and kind of like, of course, people ask you questions where you think, oh, of course that makes sense to me because I live it and breathe it every day. But it was a chance for a lot of clarifying questions. And I think for us, it was a cue to, if we were successful and went forward, this is what we really needed to strengthen in terms of our argument for the proposal, because people were kind of saying like, these are the areas we don't understand. And so that was helpful for the future of the process. So yeah, so a phone call, we spent an hour on a Zoom call. It is what it is. We all kind of gave each other grace. We divvied up the sections of kind of the buckets of kinds of questions we might face. And again, the flexibility on our part to get as many folks to come talk to us and get the sense of the passion was something I would suggest to everybody.
Thanks so much. Joel, what was your experience?
I was kind of bummed when we weren't able to do a site visit, because I remember this time last year when sitting through this, and it was the nonprofit panel, and I think it was, I can't remember the guy's name, but it was from LeSoup, and they talked about how they did a meal, and it was like they got really creative with their site visit. And I, oh, this is going to be great. We're going to be able to have people in our garage and just kind of getting those kind of creative juices going. And so I was really bummed that we weren't able to do that. But with our site visit, what I guess a couple of things we did is we had our whole team. There's only 4 of us, but our whole team on the call, and we had people, you know, in different places. We had one guy, our operations manager was in the garage, and we were able to see different parts of it. So we tried to get creative in how to show. I even offered if the site visit, they wanted to like drive through our garage or some way to like get people down there, even in a safe way. But then it allowed us to do things that I don't think we would have done, where we were able to share, we shared 2 videos of our clients. And so they really got to hear these stories. I don't know if we were sitting in person that it would have worked showing a video of our client. Like, I think it would have felt kind of, I don't know, just kind of different. So it was the new, I don't know, medium of having this site visit. It kind of allowed you to do things a little bit differently. So, I think it worked well in sharing these videos. One thing we did that we learned a lot, this was when we did our site visit, it was the first time we had ever presented, I think that I'd ever shared my screen on a Zoom call. You know, been in lots of Zoom calls. And so we actually did a full run through with our whole team, everybody in the right spots. And we had some other people kind of be our guests on it. So we were able to get feedback and learn how that worked. And I think that was really important, so that I don't think it was totally hiccup free during the call, but at least made it work a little bit smoother.
Thanks so much, Joe. Pat, what was your experience for your site visit?
Well, to answer some of the questions, the chair of the education committee is the one who is the person who contacted me about being selected for the site visit. And then we interacted about scheduling it. I was allowed to have 2 other team members on the call. And I chose an officer who I had worked with for over 20 years at major university, who was now in Ohio. And she's secretary on the board of directors. And I chose, instead of choosing another board member, I chose the director of the recreation center. Now, the tech center, the Althea Center, will be sharing space, or is being leased space within the same properties with the recreation center. And the recreation center is a very energized, just beautiful space. And so it would have been lovely for a face-to-face site visit with children, at least after school hours, coming in and out. And I had run some pilot programs with both school-age children and adult seniors. So I was looking forward to, if I got that far before the pandemic, of involving them in the site visit. But as it turned out, it was a Zoom call. And so it was very fortunate that I had included people I had had experience with, because they surprised me with giving a history of their work with me and how I was capable of leading that project. So I was stunned by that, but it was great having their support. And in that area. Now, as far as who attended, there were various members from the education committee, and some had been teachers in their past, and there were also representatives from the finance committee. So as I said, one of my weak points was the budget. So they had sent me 5 or 6 very difficult questions in advance, and they required written answers. So prior to the meeting. So apparently I answered them to their satisfaction because those questions didn't come up again. So one of my recommendations that I didn't speak to yet was that I doubt that anyone would be in the situation that I was in, because most applicants will have had some previous history and would have some accounting and budgeting expertise at their disposal. But be very careful and diligent about those budgets as you apply. So that's what some of the questions, but what happened was pretty spontaneous, and it was, they were having difficulty picturing how a tech lab would play out, or how it would look in this Victorian house with antique furnishing that I intend to keep. So Michael, who was the director of the recreation center, just said, would you like a tour? So he went around with his phone and gave them a virtual tour of the space so they could see the beauty of the physical environment and get a sense of what I intend to do with that space. And so that's how that went. They asked questions about growth, and that would be another recommendation. Because they questioned me about growth past in the area of budgeting, past the funding year, should I receive that funding? And that wasn't apparent in my budgeting. But all in all, I started out nervous, but it turned out to be a very invigorating and pleasant site visit and experience, because I got to express my intent and passion for this center. And also we got to talk about, I had already been thinking about how I was going to deliver these services during COVID, and they brought up those questions, and we had a good exchange about that. So that was that experience.
Thanks so much. It's site visits are a very invigorating experience too for the Impact 100 participants who are part of it too. And I think it gives us all an opportunity for these shared passions that are so important. So thank you very much.
And Pat, you kind of set us up perfectly for our next question for everybody. As Claire mentioned, and we've kind of already talked about this, we're pretty into the data and the financials here at Impact 100. We actually have a committee we call CIRC, which is Community Investment Review Committee, and they review the financials of anybody asked to submit the common grant and receive a site visit. So my question is, for the panelists, what were the questions that you got regarding your financials and your budgets, both for your project and your organization at large, from that committee during the review process? And I'm going to start this round with Joel.
We got questions that I was actually looking back over them. There were there were questions about the organization and about the program. And so we had questions about like the loans receivable on our balance sheet. I mean, so they were getting into line items on the financial documents. And that was just about not the bridge program that we're applying for, but a whole organization. It went into the budget for organization, and then also the budget for the program. And so we got, I think it was a total of about half a dozen questions. And I think my replies were like 4 or 5 pages where it was, here's the question, and then here's all the support behind. Some of them were very easy to answer, where it was like, oh yeah, this is, we knew the answer to it, so that was easy. There were 1 or 2 where it was like, all right, we got to, make sure we've got the numbers and everything to support this, and it was good to kind of get that challenge. I kind of felt like the process. Maybe I shouldn't say this because we haven't signed the agreement yet, but we're getting close. It kind of felt like when you go to the dentist and you come out and you don't have any cavities, where it was a little nerve-wracking, kind of going through that process, but good to know that women who knew their stuff were digging into our finances, and we came out okay on the other side. So yeah, it was good for us.
Thank you. I'm going to make sure that I send that little tidbit to the CERC review committee so that they can hear how wonderful that experience was. Adrijana, could you speak to your financial questions, please?
Yeah, I can. And yeah, thanks for that analogy, Joel. It's going to stick with me too. So it was like going to the dentist, get ready for thorough vetting. And I think, if you know anything about Impact 100, you know that it is, it's known for that vetting process. So, I think to be a finalist or to be an awardee is a huge feather in our cap. And honestly, I tell everybody who wants to hear and who doesn't want to hear, I just feel like the vetting is so thorough. Yes. So know your stuff, know your finances. People do get into the line items. And so what was challenging for us, and I don't know if there might be some on the call who are in a similar situation, I was in the role for about a year when these questions came through. And so my operational philosophy was a little bit different than my predecessor. And so we had been changing some financial accounting procedures and all of that. And that hadn't yet showed in my financials. We were still showing kind of older approach. And so to be given the opportunity to explain how it's a new day and there's going to be some tightening of things where Impact 100 had questions. I appreciated the opportunity to be able to kind of assure them of that. And so, it was thorough vetting. Like I said, everyone's financials are different, but to the extent that there are unusual things on your balance sheet, we had that situation. Given the opportunity to explain what that is and kind of how you're addressing those situations, that's there. And I think, whoever they had looking on the other side of that, to me, were professionals. Clearly, these were people who are familiar with accounting practices and bookkeeping and things like that. So as long as you kind of know your stuff or have a good bookkeeper you can lean on to help you understand this, you'll be in good shape.
Great, thank you. And Pat, would you like to go more in depth in terms of the questions you received, please?
Well, they weren't necessarily specific to the questioning the amounts or anything, but it was like, who was going to oversee the purchasing and management of equipment?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the questions arose because there was nothing in the budget for staffing. And so that raised some flags. But the initial year for the Althea Center was in-kind services or volunteer services. So I had to answer those questions, and also questions about growth, because there is an intent to hire at least instructional technologists maybe after the first year, and there was no reflection of that in the budget. So that was an oversight. And who in the meantime was going to teach all these courses and programs. And so that was going to also come from my colleagues from Iowa who are volunteering their services in that area to be guests from a distance. So it was those kinds of things that were specific to my project that might not apply to another project. So I should have been more clear from the onset of it was spoken of in the narrative, but it wasn't footnoted in the budget. It should have been footnoted in the budget.
Great. Great feedback, Pat. Thank you so much. And Claire, if you'd like to wrap up this question.
Yeah, a couple of things. St. Vincent de Paul is kind of unique, I think, in that it has kind of 3 affiliate organizations all together. So we have our thrift store operations, we call it society operations, and then the charitable pharmacy is actually its own separate 501c3. And so, although it's ultimately, the board reports to the society board. So there were questions around that structure. It's not the most common, and so I think it was a little hard for folks to wrap their mind around budgeting and who ultimately oversees budgeting. And along with that too, we had to actually submit, even though the charitable pharmacy has its own budget, we had to submit budget for the affiliate society. And so we actually submitted kind of 2 organizations worth of financials. So that was one thing that we kind of walked through with the committee. Another big thing we've kind of touched on is in-kind. Our charitable pharmacy relies very heavily on medication donations, and we account for the value of those, which is, close to like $8 million per year in donated pharmaceuticals. And so I think it's important to include in-kind revenue sources in your budgets, but it also, what I appreciate about Impact is that doesn't, I think they really take a good look at that and say, oh, okay, that part is that, if you look really just at their cash budget, it's a much kind of smaller organization than it appears when you factor in all this in-kind support. So we had some questions around that. And then I remember too, there was truly just one mistake we had made. I think it was revenue we had projected for a special event that we just had plugged in the wrong number, straight up mistake that they caught. And we just basically said, sorry, it was just a mistake. And we worked through that. But our accounting manager felt so terrible about that, but it happens, and Impact gets it. They find the mistakes, but I think you have a really good opportunity for dialogue with committee members and just explaining what's going on.
Great. And before Kathy takes on the next question, I do want to just echo what a couple people said, and that it is a dialogue. And so I think that people are really intimidated by our CERC review, but because I think we're all just intimidated by financials, let's be real. But it is a dialogue, and when we talk about being in partnership with our applicants and our recipients, that is true. So it is scary, but it's a conversation.
Mm-hmm. And moving forward, we are certainly anticipating too that applicants coming in this year will have some stories to tell due to the world. So we'll certainly be looking to continue dialogue as it relates to those things moving forward. I'm going to kind of combine for our panelists 2 of the questions, because they both have to do with sort of both the process and what you were ready for and advice. And many of you have shared great tips already all along the way. So we really are super appreciative of that. But as you consider the Impact 100 process, what were you kind of ready for? What did you like? What was surprising? And then as you went through the process, what do you wish you had known the answers to, or any other advice that you haven't already shared? So that's kind of a whole lot of things, but what is your sense of feedback about the whole process, and what did you wish you had known before you had done so? So Joel, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, the process at these these dates are crystallized in my mind forever because we had a fundraising event scheduled for March 14th. And, the grant application was supposed to be due on Friday, March 13th. And we shut everything down March 12th. And so one thing I was really just appreciative of is that, I mean, we had most of our stuff ready to go, but I was really appreciative that Impact 100 was able to say, hey, let's just give everybody another week because everyone is just dealing with this stuff. So even just that grace was great. So, and then even reaching out and saying, hey, can you still do this? I think it was just good. I felt like Impact just recognized what nonprofits were going through and allowed for those changes. I wish we could have done the award ceremony, you know, just from hearing from people. And so, you know, we did the recorded speech, which sometimes it's hard given a passionate speech when I think there was a guy working the camera and Cindy in the room. And and when you're not getting that feedback and that energy from the room, but it was also knowing everybody was going through the same thing. And so, you know, the night of was obviously exciting for us. The awards, I think it would have been just amazing to have that room full of people, and also for the other organizations as well, just to have those connections that could have been made the night of. So, I mean, it's hard to say as someone who was organization was chosen as a grant recipient. It was good for us, but I appreciated that Impacts helped with those changes. One other just piece was, as the chaos was unfolding, it was really good for me and for our organization to have something to focus on. And so it wasn't even, you know, as things were unfolding early on, it was, hey, get this grant application in. And so I was just really thankful for these things that Impact didn't just say, you know what, we're going to wipe this thing out for the year, but we're going to figure out how to do this, because it gave us, it kind of brought us back to reality a little bit.
Thanks very much. Pat?
Yes, it's funny that he talks about the March, because I have a 99-year-old mother that's in a home, and I got my common grant submitted on I thought it was the 12th, that Friday. And I had stayed up. I had been spending a lot of time with her, and I had stayed up really late during that week. And I came down with a cough. I think it was due at noon on Friday. I came down with a cough, and they had already started eliminating people that had coughs. And so they had told us that they were going to shut down the nursing home that Saturday to everybody. And so I was going to see my mother for the last time on Friday, supposedly. And I came down with a cough. And then, but I had already submitted my application Thursday night. And then I saw the email that it was extended to the next Friday. So I was thinking that I had compromised my immune system and came down with a cough, and I wasn't able to go to the nursing home. So all of this happened around COVID, but it gave me a chance to, that extra week gave me a chance to strengthen a part of the proposal that I hadn't had time for. So, but in answer to the question about what I was ready for and what I wasn't ready for, I was ready for everything up until that involved the writing. But past that, I wasn't ready for any of that. That doesn't mean I didn't like it. It just means I had never been involved in a process like this. You either got the grant or you didn't get the grant. And you were told before you went to an award ceremony. So that was different for me. So anything past the submission of the grant, that included the site visit and the 5-minute presentation, and actually going to the award ceremony And I think it was different for us that we were required to go, or we were asked to go to the award ceremony in person. And initially it was going to be all virtual. So that was a little bit awkward, being in the room and with the recipients and the non-recipients. So I call them winners and non-winners instead of losers. So that was a bit awkward and inconvenient. So
lessons learned.
right.
Adrijana.
What was surprising is having to do it on the video. That was insane. It's just a different, it's such a different medium than if you are, as Joel said, in front of a room of excited folks who, you know, you can respond to your audience and things like that. And therefore the prep for that was a lot different. I don't know if Lisa works with others, but we had a coach this time. We had a young woman who was helping us, and she has media experience. And so we were meeting with her in advance of our recorded presentations, you know, and she was coaching us on how to tighten the pitch. You know, I don't know why I thought 5 minutes was so short. I thought it was cruel and unusual. And so it really, you know, with Lisa's help, you kind of had to be under that in order to ensure that you really weren't going over the time. So that, to me, that time frame, it just made it almost impossible that there was going to be another person talking, even though we had that option. So I chose to be the only one speaking. So again, I don't think Impact anticipated it being on video, but we did the best we could. And so the recording itself, we had 2 takes. We were allowed to have 2 takes. And of course I go first in the morning, and you know, I feel like I did a fine job the first time around. And, you know, we're switching out podiums, and it's, you know, it's just the stuff, everyone's trying to figure it out. And so my second take is awful. I mean, I'm messing up, and I was just kind of getting more nervous, I felt like, because I had 2 times to do this. Whereas, you know, if it was live, that wouldn't be a thing that you had the pleasure of. So that was unusual. Again, I don't think that's going to stick, but it was this year. And then the only other thing I wasn't prepared for, you know, when it's a more traditional year, you present and you know your feedback that same evening. This was recorded, you know, a couple weeks in advance, and we all were able to see each other's pitches. And so it was just a whole lot of stewing on my part. Like, I couldn't even look at Joel because I just thought they knocked it out of the ballpark. And so for me, it just allowed to real appreciation of how everybody was prepared. And these are really worthy projects. And therefore I felt like we had no shot. So we showed up for the celebration, socially distant and very safe. But, you know, I was pretty relaxed because I thought, well, we're not getting this one. And so when we did, I'd have to echo Pat's comments. It was just a little bit awkward. I felt kind of guilty, like everybody needed to hug the ones who didn't. But, you know, it is what it is. So those are just some kind of takeaways in terms of what was surprising and or different. Not sure how much of that will translate to a traditional year.
Assuming a traditional year.
Yeah, that's true.
Whatever that is.
That's true.
Claire, what is your perspective from a little more distance?
One thing is really, this is a process, and you really have to be at a place where you can commit time and energy to this. At each stage, like Adrijana said earlier, you have to think of each stage of putting your best foot forward. And it really takes a lot of effort, I'd say, to make it through the impact process. So definitely take the time to prepare for each stage. And that, I mean, I'm even thinking back, like we were at the last minute submitting our application because we were waiting for a quote from our contractor on the cost of like these silly, you know, I don't know, countertops or whatever it was for the budget. And I'm like, we should have really started, like give yourself the time to really take each stage seriously and put your best foot forward. Additionally, I think one thing that was kind of a pleasant surprise throughout the process for us was what is transformative. I think we had always, like I said earlier, we had considered this year after year after year. Do we have the right project? And even in the year we applied, I remember we talked about creating this new program where we'd be delivering medications to people's homes. And gosh, it sounded wonderful. And I'm sure it would have been funded by Impact because it was like this really cool thing. But holy cow, I mean, what were we thinking? Like, we're going to create this brand new program just so it sounds, it's just to make it transformative and so that the Impact will fund it. Well, that would have been, a big mistake on our end. And so we really kind of reeled it back in and said, what are our current needs? And I think nonprofits sometimes sell themselves short in that we're like, oh, this program where we're getting free medications to people in need isn't transformative. That's transformative in itself. And I think it was affirmed throughout the Impact process. And that was nice. I think, like I said, a kind of a pleasant surprise that just kind of our, what we're doing each and every day is transformative. And so I would say one piece of advice is just don't feel like you have to go create some like brand new thing that is going to sound really awesome and exciting. If that's not the direction your organization is going, don't do it. Really, trust that Impact sees the transformation you're making possible in your organization each and every day. So that's one thing. And then the final thing I wanted to add to, I had, I'd say a kind of a bonus privilege in that I had attended the annual awards ceremony in the past. And I would encourage you, if you have the chance to attend an annual awards ceremony, go. I think it gives you a really good sense of how Impact members respond to different presentations. And I think it kind of gives you a little leg up in that you've seen what works and what may not work as well. So yeah, if you're able to attend in the fall some year when you're not actually applying, go for it. Definitely attend. It gives you some great context.
Great.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.
And we're going to go to we're about to open the floor, but I do want to go back to Kristen's really great question earlier on of how important is it to include a sustainability plan for the project beyond Impact 100 funding? And since this wasn't one of our pre-scripted questions, if anybody wants to raise their hand and is just raring to go, ask to talk about sustainability, you can go first. Anybody want to talk about sustainability?
I can talk. Oh, sorry, Joel, did you?
No, go ahead for it.
Thank you. Super quick. I think it's important to share your thinking about what this is, right? No one wants to just put money into a bottomless pit. So if you've not thought about it, I don't think you should be submitting a proposal. So to me, it's a fair question. The level of detail you might have, we all have our guesses as to what's going to happen in the future, but I do think having the mental discipline to have thought through what will you do when the initial funding is gone, is an important one. So for us, there are aspects of our project that were built in sustainability. We were only going to expand at one point, and once we did, we had that dedicated space. We were only going to buy these fridges to start, and so some of that was kind of answered for us. But the other was to really have a conversation with our college partners and say, when we have the proof of concept, when we are able to shore up the data that this works and it helps our retention and it helps shorten the time to graduation, we're going to need you to say that you are committed to this project as well. And it also gives us time to have data to be able to go to other funders and say, we have this operational food pantry. These are its outcomes. Please help support its ongoing activities. So for us, thinking through that process, knowing that the college was committed to it and being able to demonstrate that was really important. To me, it's owed to the funder or any potential funder to have thought through that.
Great.
Yeah, kind of second that you just we had a question about, we were going to buy these cars and use them for so long. And then one of the questions came up, well, what's going to happen at the end of the life of these cars? And so the kind of question was showing that they would have no value. And so we were able to say, no, they do have value, and here's how we're going to use that. And I think what was important in that is that we had shown that we had thought through it, not showing that we had a crystal ball for what was going to happen in 3 years, but at least some thought had been put into it of, we're not just going to spend this money and it's going to be gone, but this is how it's going to continue and help sustain the program.
Great, thank you. Claire, would you like to share?
Going back once again to in-kind support, I think really highlighting the in-kind role moving forward. You know, any ideas you may have around, like Adrijana talked about earlier, like hosting drives. So that too, it doesn't just have to be financially, this is how we're gonna, you know, where we're gonna find the money to continue this, but highlighting once again, any in-kind sources of revenue.
Great, thank you. And Pat, do you have anything to add?
I don't have much to add right now.
Great.
So we've come to the point, we have just a few minutes left on our call, and I don't see any additional questions in the chat. At this moment, if anyone has some final questions that they would like to ask our panelists, please unmute and ask away. Sounds like we have done a great job of answering a lot of questions, and I can certainly say that for me personally, even having been involved in this process quite, for a number of years, I learned something every time. And I would echo Sarah Grace's opening comments that this is one of our very favorite opportunities to interact with all of you, and the awesome impact that you are having on our community and on individuals and groups of people. So just thank you. We just want to really thank all of you for being part of this day. A reminder to those who are on the call who might be considering applying to Impact 100, that deadline is Friday, December 11th at noon. And we strongly encourage you not to wait till the last minute. I think our panelists today have echoed that kind of idea that working overtime is better than last minute. So you can find the application at impact100.org, apply for a grant. There are lots of resources there, recordings from previous sessions. And again, just want to thank all of you for being here, and hope that you have a great rest of the day. Thanks again to the panelists.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I am posting our YouTube channel here. All of our two prior LOI trainings are on there, and this recording will be up today as well if you'd like to go back. So thank you so much to our panelists and to everyone on the call. Appreciate it.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.